Hello everyone, this is the Gamer Dojo, and we're going to do our top 5 fantasy movies today. From any year, you can make the argument that it's a fantasy movie, right? We'll list it. So let's just go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Keith.
I'm Henry.
Dan.
Gerard.
Okay, so we're just going to go through our top 5 picks and a few honorable mentions. And we'll start off with our number 5 picks.
So got my number 5 pick would be Clash of the Titans.
The original or
the original, not
okay.
the remake.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify.
It's a funny thing about this movie because I remember seeing this movie a long time ago, and I'm still thinking about it. I haven't watched this movie in a while, but it just sticks out to me more than it has in any of the other fantasy movies I have. Maybe because of like a lot of the unique stop motion animation that they did in the movie. And also, it just seems, when you talk about classic fantasy movies, usually that's the first thing I think of. You got like Gorgons and Cyclopses and and these and the Kraken. It's I think usually to me that's kind of the first thing I'll think of when I think of fantasy. I mean, give or take about elves and orcs and all that, but Clash of Titans will be the first that I remember watching.
I remember that movie back in the 80s.
It was really good.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. It always felt long, but I enjoyed every second of it.
I was thinking of the Medusa part in that movie.
The Medusa part, I remember.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing at the time.
I remember having to watch that like 2 to 3 times trying to figure out where the scorpions came from. So it was like he's fighting these scorpions out of nowhere, not realizing that it was her blood. It was like the 4th time that I'm sitting there really picking it up that it was the blood itself was turning into these creatures that were coming after him. But even the owl.
Yeah, that owl too was very
pretty
memorable.
cool. Yeah. Like to me that was like, I don't know if that came out before Star Wars or not, but to me that was
right
like,
around the same time.
That was like
Star Wars is 77.
Okay.
So
Something parodied that owl. I'm trying to remember what.
Was it South Park?
Maybe South Park.
Yeah,
probably.
When did you first watch that? When you were a kid or recently?
Oh wow, that movie! I watched it when I first moved here from Hong Kong. I think it was like '92. Funny enough, it was on the USA Network. I think it was one of those weird Saturday afternoon movies that just popped up, and I remember watching. It kind of stuck with me for a while. I mean, I watched a lot of science fiction movies and fantasy movies growing up, but live action ones are kind of rare. My parents didn't really show me a lot of live action fantasy movies growing up, so it was kind of the first. I came over here from overseas. I understand the lick of it because I don't speak English at the time, but upon rewatching it, then it's kind of unique.
That's one of the movies that you don't really have to know the language.
No, it's a very visual movie to begin with, anyway. So you kind of understand a lot of the themes that they're trying to get across. So it was really good.
All right, Dan.
Good pick.
My number 5, probably gonna go with Constantine.
Okay.
I saw that in the movie theater when it first came out. Didn't know what I was walking into, and for me, it was probably like my second favorite Keanu Reeves movie. I'd say that, but just the whole premise of it, the visual effects, the end sequence, the whole ending of it blew my mind. The way that they wrote it, because most of the time you get a movie and the hero is like, oh, he's unbeatable, But to see that, unfortunately, if you haven't seen it, I gotta spoil it for you. But to have the devil like rip the tar out of his body and bring him back alive just so that he can have a chance at him again was pretty cool to me.
I never seen it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I gotta say, it's just, I hate to ruin it for you like that.
No, that's right.
Like, it was definitely
It's a decent afternoon watch if you have the time.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never seen it.
It's Keanu Reeves movie.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm a Keanu Reeves.
Big Keanu Reeves fans in this household.
I definitely, I rate that up.
When did that come out?
Oh,
That was like 8, right?
That was like a mid-2000s movie.
Mid-2000s, definitely.
Just don't know.
I feel like if a movie's older than 10 years, you can spoil it. And
Yeah, it's on their fault if they didn't watch it.
really.
That's true.
Yeah.
So spoiler warnings to anyone listening to this podcast.
Yeah, just
I'll put up the
come back after.
When you saw it in theaters?
Yeah, I actually working at the movie theaters at the time.
Oh yeah.
So that was pretty much like one of my guilty pleasures.
I
was
worked
to
at a
sit
movie
there.
theater around that time.
Yeah,
too.
that was
That's
one
cool.
of my. I grew up literally with the movie theater being my babysitter. So my mother worked in the movie theater, and when I was younger, on her days off, on days off from school, that's where I was stuck.
Ah, that's cool.
So I got to watch movies for free and get free popcorn, free soda, and stuff like that. What about you, G? Yeah.
My number 5.
Yeah.
Let's see. My number 5 is Return to Oz, 1985 movie.
Never seen that.
Never seen that one?
No.
See, that's a movie that we owned on VHS.
Mhm.
Probably like a bootleg.
Okay.
I used to be able to tape tapes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we had a lot of those back in the day. Love it. I love how dark it was. I think it's more true to like the original Wizard of Oz story,
Okay.
or the books at least,
Yeah.
than like the other movie,
Mm.
the older movie. Really cool movie.
Was it Disney made?
I think so. I think Disney
Is
owns
Disney, not Jim
Wizard of
Henson?
Oz. No, it wasn't
Alright.
Jim Henson.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was definitely Disney.
Disney in the 80s was very different, I think.
Oh.
Very dark.
Yeah.
Well, there's also a time when Disney was kind of petering on losing a lot of their money, because I believe their animation studio was doing really bad until The Little Mermaid.
Oh,
came
really?
out. It
Yeah,
was
that
kind
was
of like the
like-
beginning of the Renaissance.
So that's like 89, I think.
Yeah. Anybody else? You haven't seen that movie?
I haven't seen it. I can't.
I saw it, of course.
Any thoughts on that?
It's a great movie. A lot of puppets, a lot of good costumes,
Yeah.
sets. It's just a nice visual movie to look at.
I
Yeah.
think that's important for fantasy movies.
Yeah, definitely.
You want to feel like you're in that world.
Right. A
from
lot of cool
start to
costumes.
finish. Yeah.
A lot of practical effects.
Yeah.
There is some like clay animation, I guess.
Play animation. Yeah.
Well, Henry, you ever seen that movie before?
I've never
You've never
seen
seen
it.
that either. A lot of
No.
people haven't, which is
I've
kind of.
seen.
I think I might have
poster.
caught it
I've
on like
never
TV, but never really.
watched it.
Yeah.
It didn't do well in the movie theaters.
It was on HBO. It's on HBO like on demand once in a while.
Is it?
You just never had a chance to watch
I
it.
think I'll definitely take some time this
Yeah.
weekend. Maybe might take that in.
It's a weird movie. I mean, we watched a lot when we were kids. So
Yeah.
like
Let's
this
see.
list is pretty much all movies that I watched when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if I'd seen it, I don't know what my reaction would be.
Right.
Mhm.
Like if I would like it as much, surprisingly,
Right.
which I thought was cool. But
Cool.
yeah, Keith.
Okay. Yeah. So for my number 5, I chose Excalibur. It's a great movie.
It's an English movie.
Yeah. Good English movie. Good
Liam
cast.
Neeson,
Liam
Patrick
Neeson,
Stewart.
yeah.
Oh wow.
Before they were famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're all English actors.
Gabriel Byrne.
yeah, it's very
Whoa.
rare you see a good King Arthur movie. And
Yeah.
there was a recent one, and I watched it on TV. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think for King Arthur, that's the best you're gonna do, and good soundtrack.
Yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard O Fortuna.
Right.
You know that you hear that in like all these movies now, the
Yeah.
trailers.
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever heard it was in that
That's
movie.
good. It's a little long, but it's good. I know
Does
there's
it-
different versions. There's like a rated R version
Really.
and like a rated PG version.
Okay.
So
Is there to touch on the King Arthur thing?
Yeah.
Does it cover like the whole story of Arthur, or is it pretty much
They don't
just
do the
he's
sword in the
already-
stone, do they?
no.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the sword's in the lake,
Okay.
and Merlin retrieves it from the lady in the lake.
Gotcha.
And it's all about the Grail, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, the quest for the Grail.
Gotcha.
And it's like after he's king.
Right.
So Lancelot take his girl in this
Yeah.
movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
it's good. It follows the
You've never
stories.
seen that one, huh?
No,
But you know
that
the
one.
story
I
pretty
know
well.
the story. We had to read that in
Yeah,
middle school.
exactly.
Like the whole from Uther to the Grail,
Right.
and
It
I gave up after like realizing this one went there, that one went there, and I think for me reading that kind of put fantasy in perspective as far as like writing an epic.
Right.
When you write something where you got multiple pieces going on at the same time, but this person is off doing this, and
Yeah.
this actually matters. What's
Yeah.
going on, rather than it be just the hero and what he's doing.
I mean, those stories are so old, from like 1,000
Yeah,
years ago. If you could find like updated, translated versions of it, it's a good read, because that's like the start of all that sort of fantasy.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
I can see like that being a big influence on like Lord of the Rings. The guy who wrote Lord
That's
of the
what
Rings.
I-
Sure it is. Yeah. So we'll go on to our number 4 pick with Henry first.
All right, so down to number 4, that would be the movie Pan's Labyrinth. It's a foreign film, so probably most likely not many people have seen it. But although it is a director, which now I'm forgetting his name,
Guillermo
del
right?
Toro,
Yeah.
just had a new movie out, Shape of Water, which is also really good. But
Oh, you saw that?
yeah,
Oh.
it's
I was wondering how it was.
it's
I
kind
wanted
of
to see it.
it's really good.
It's a
but
love story.
It's a love story. It's like Beauty and the Beast, but
Okay.
extremely adult themes.
Really?
Gotcha. And it has nothing to do with the guy from Hellboy.
No.
Okay, because
No,
that's
it
what
looks
I
like
was
the guy-
sitting there
It's
watching
really-
it.
it's
going
really
like,
weird.
Is this
It's-
his origin story that I didn't get
That'd
in
be
Hellboy?
interesting.
Same director, right?
Yeah.
Same director,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, for Pan's Labyrinth, it's a more of a it's definitely a fantasy movie because there's creatures, you know, whether or not it's part of like this imagination of this little girl that you kind of follow around. It's kind of up in the air, but you know, just the striking imagery of some of the like the demons or like the like what was it, one of those little they call him Pan. I think it's like a little goat, like a goat
I think that's
dude.
what his name is. In
Yeah, his Pan is
his
his name.
Pan. In Greek
With the
mythology,
horns,
his name
yeah.
is Pan. I don't know.
Just some of the makeup that
He's
they've
not
done
the
in that
Minotaur,
movie is
Centaur.
really good. A lot of practical effects and all that too. But you know, I think for me that movie is more striking because it's a fantasy film, but it's not about the fantasy. It's you know, it takes place during the Spanish Civil War, so you know this little girl's kind of living under a very oppressive father or father-in-law. You know, kind of mistreats her mother, and just in the end, you know, the way you know it ends up, and just a spoiler, you know, where she ends up getting shot by the same man. You know, it's a very sad tale, but you know, and at the same time, it tries to tell the brutality of war,
Yeah.
but using fantasy as a means to do so. A lot of Del Toro movies tend to hide a lot of dark themes with fantasy, that too.
I mean,
So
that gives it substance. You don't want something too, I
it
guess.
does. But it's a nice fairy tale, but you know,
Yeah.
just don't go under. Don't bring your kids. I mean, it's a movie that's definitely just for adults. It's kind of trying to prove a point about you know the Spanish Civil War, which he was trying to, you know, show the brutality. You know, it's not a movie to see if you're afraid of a lot of violence and gore, but you know.
I think I want to see it now that you said that. Like,
You-
I
you
wanna
never
see
seen that
it.
one?
No, that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
mm-mm.
I like that.
It's extremely striking.
The the visuals in that movie are awesome. The character, the creation, whatever, the makeup in that movie is just amazing. Just for that reason alone.
It wasn't. There's not much CGI in it. It's
There's
mostly,
some, but like I mean,
it's mostly
there's a lot of
sets and
there's a lot of actual practical effects they use
Okay.
in it.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
because the problem is that with that type of movie and that budget, you couldn't do full like not everything can be practical. So
Mhm.
there are points where you'll see that CG, but a lot of the big shots in the movie they're practical.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
My number 4, pretty recent. I enjoyed it a lot. Probably watched that quite a few times. Taught me personally lessons about ego and chilling out and what I want to do. And it's a love story. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I'm a gamer, so to see the comedy in it, but also the just the merging of the two worlds, a video game aspect of it, but it not really being acknowledged that, you know, it is fantasy going on right now. You know, it's just like, no, this is normal. You know, they're going to be playing guitars and flying in the air and throwing 100, you know, life points and stuff like that popping up. I really enjoyed that mesh of it, where it didn't get too like, okay, it never, for me, it didn't let me down as far as like me getting bored, basically. You know, because some movies you get, it's like, okay, you can see what you're doing. It's getting tiring, like, to really keep up with it. I felt like it had the quest element of it, where he had to go through each different boyfriend and that type of thing. And like I said, for me, it was definitely
With the structure like boss fights.
yeah, there's definitely that, you know, and that's something that I really, when I watch a lot of movies right now with fantasy elements, I want boss fights.
Yeah.
Like, I want the ending to be epic and
Right.
great, and to, you know, the heroes are about to lose, and then that type of stuff, definitely.
It's good. A lot of video game references.
Yeah,
Zelda,
absolutely.
Mario,
Yeah.
Sonic. Yeah.
I couldn't leave that one out. It's just, I mean, it's the Gamer Dojo. You know how we do
Yeah.
here, but the definitely that was just because, and once again, when we get into what's fantasy and what's not, I feel like that kind of really threads the line as far as it being sci-fi, but
Right.
it's
Yeah, I wouldn't really
Still.
consider it sci-fi. I think
yeah.
it's a video game movie, but what would you categorize that? Fantasy?
That's the only way I really go into it is thinking, I couldn't really see it getting divvied up into any other
Right.
genre.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I would say it's fantasy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I like
Not
it.
traditional fantasy, but
Yeah,
It's a fun
definitely.
movie. Doesn't take itself too seriously. which is
Exactly.
good.
All right. So my number 4 is another movie that we used to watch a lot when I was a little kid because we had the bootleg tape. It's called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
I forgot. I love that movie.
You like that movie? Yeah, I'm
definitely.
surprised you even saw that movie.
Yeah, Cinemax. Tim's on Cinemax every weekend. Every morning, like 10-ish, 11 o'clock in the morning on Cinemax. So like that was on.
And not too many people I know know that movie.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a Terry Gilliam movie too,
I believe so. Yeah.
which I love. I love him. Like I love his directing style. Time Bandits, right? Weird movie, kind of hard to explain. It's just pretty much centers around this guy named Baron Munchausen and takes place in the 18th century. And it's just like his tales, which everyone believes were tall tales,
Yes.
were actually real.
Yeah.
You know, and they show you like the crazy shit that happened. And he had like a band of followers.
Yeah, that was the rogues gallery of those characters. Kind of once again for me, like when you're building a cast of heroes or whatever, characters, just to see each one and how they interact. Like you don't want to just have like the Power Rangers. You just know it's the red costume, the blue costume, that type of thing. With that, I saw like actual characters, and you could see that they were busy doing their own thing the whole time.
Yeah. Everyone had their own powers. Like one guy ran really fast.
Yeah.
One guy was super strong.
Yep.
One guy could hear really well.
Yeah.
Baron Munchausen, I guess he was just a good fighter.
Yeah. I mean, he's
and the lover.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was the
Yeah.
fact that he was like wild enough to do all that stuff, to be involved in it. Period.
Yeah. But, another movie that used a lot of practical effects.
Yes.
I guess they must have used some sort of green screen or something, blue or whatever the hell it was back then.
I don't know. That's really hard to tell because you would think like I figured they would have to build those sets some of it.
Yeah, pretty much all of it was probably built from scratch. But awesome visual movie. I would definitely recommend it if you know these now. And it has a lot of comedy in it too. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Isn't he the only American?
Yeah,
He's the only American out of the entire group.
Yeah, and he used to do, I think, the cartoons that you see in Monty Python. I think that was his big thing in the group.
Was he he was one of the members, right?
Yeah,
He's one of the members.
He didn't do a lot of the skits. Like he would be
He
like
acted
a
in a
side character.
few.
Yeah, but I think he was more the animator and the director actually. But all right, that's my number 4.
All right, so my number 4, kind of to like piggyback off of Henry's 5th pick. It's very similar. Jason the Argonauts, I would say, is my number 4 pick. The same practical effects guy, Ray Harryhausen, I think his name is.
Yeah.
But it's a good movie. It's a little short. It's an hour and 20 minutes, I think, which is a little shorter than normal runtime. But from start to finish, it keeps you interested. There's no filler. The practical effects. It's from '63, so I don't know how they did some of that stuff. Like when they had the Titan, like a huge Titan on screen with the little guys. Some of the special
You'd be
effects.
surprised. I mean, you think about like movies like what was it like Cleopatra and was it the original what was that Charlton Heston movie where he's a chariot racer? Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
Those old movies. A lot of perspective tricks.
Right,
And,
exactly. A lot of
perspective tricks.
camera tricks. You could tell they definitely put a lot of effort into it, which you don't really see much. And the movie ends on an awesome battle, and then it just ends right after that. There's no
there's no filler.
Skeleton battle is pretty cool. The harpies, nice effect, but the Titan I think was the coolest effect in that movie. Seeing how the gods just toy with all the humans is pretty funny.
Yeah. Crazy movie.
Yeah.
People die left and right in that movie.
Yeah. Very cool, especially for being so old.
Yeah.
Over 50 years old now. Yeah, that's good. So let's move on to our number 3 pick.
All right, so my number 3 pick. Technically, it's entire. I would say the entire trilogy, but more specifically, it's Lord of the Rings: Two Towers. I love those fantasy movies. Kind of when I was watching them in high school, especially they don't really make a lot of epic fantasy movies as they used to. You don't really see that during the '90s and 2000s. But with what was it, Fellowship of the Ring, and then onto Two Towers, it was kind of like the first time I've seen a fantasy movie kind of done right. I mean, they paced it so that during correct sections, they help that the books were in threes.
Yeah.
So they had a back like a kind of like a framework to work with those movies. But Two Towers especially, mainly because I remember the first time I've seen that battle at Helm's Deep was just amazing.
That was definitely.
They don't make a lot of especially in the most part they did it with practical effects too. They had actual people dressed up as orcs, when the sets and all that, which when you watch it again, it's just amazing how well that entire scene is done, especially the suspense and then the actual fight, But and then if you watch the extended edition, especially the part where they're in I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it, but that movie in particular, out of all the 3 films, sticks out to me more. Mainly because Return of the King had some amazing scenes, but I think that movie had too many false endings.
Yeah,
it felt like the movie ended. For me, oh, is this about to end?
Yeah.
Oh, there's another 20 minutes. Oh, great.
Yep.
It's gonna end. Oh, another 10 minutes. Fuck.
Yeah,
that was the problem with
theaters was pretty rough, I think.
The Two Towers worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
There was Chronicles of Narnia.
So that was your number 3.
That was my number 3, especially the two Towers. Just because it had enough stakes where it got me interested. I mean, the movie was long, but it was only out of all 3 movies, that was the only movie that I didn't almost fall asleep in some parts of.
Right.
Especially watching the extended editions,
Yeah.
I could still rewatch that.
I can only watch the extended editions now.
It's hard to go back watching the theatrical because there's a lot of stuff they cut out.
Yeah.
But then again, Return of the King was 3.5 hours long.
Yeah.
So with the extended cuts.
I think with that, they I remember watching the first Lord of the Rings and going, because this kind of times in with my 3rd pick is actually The Hobbit.
The first one?
The cartoon version. I remember it used to come on Cartoon Network. I can't remember if it was the Christmas Eve or Thanksgiving Eve. I just remember it being on, and that cartoon version just had me, and I was just caught up in that whole story. And then as an adult, watching the newer versions, the live action ones, and getting to see Gollum be even more animated and even more of a character. And I remember watching that first Lord of the Rings movie and going, okay, this is the same stuff. I'm waiting on what's happening in Hobbit, not knowing that this is a completely different story that has nothing to do with what I'm waiting on.
Yeah.
And then when I watched the second one, once again, I'm like, okay, this is going to happen now. And then by the time the third one came out, I had done enough research to realize, okay, what I'm looking for is not going to be in these movies.
Yeah.
But I remember one of the funniest things in the world to me is Gollum's face when he's doing the riddles with Bilbo, and he's like, well, what do I get? And he's like, well, if I gets it right, he said, we eats it. And I was just sitting there, I was like, that's the cutest thing in my head. It's he had this smile on his face, and I'm like, yeah, you should eat him. Just eat him. Doesn't matter. But definitely, either or, the live action or the cartoon, I just remember that story.
I remember the cartoon back in the day. I didn't understand it. It went over my head a little bit back then.
I've watched it so many times because that's how I remember it came on. It was Cartoon Network would have that on during the holiday season. I remember having to go to families' houses and being like, I'm the oldest, but I'm still a kid, oldest of the kids, so I'm not really playing with them, But the TV's on, so just put on Cartoon Network. It was on, and I just remember 3 years in a row, really just encompassing everything. Never looked at it ever again after. Didn't read into the book or anything. Just knowing that around this time, this movie was coming on.
Yeah.
Number 3.
My number 3 is The Neverending Story.
That was definitely on. That's my honorable mention.
Yeah.
That's definitely my honorable mention.
I watched that movie so many times, and we didn't own that. I used to make my mom rent that for me all the time. And I don't know. It's something about that movie. I really related to it. Both the characters, like the little boy, that was reading the book, and Atreyu.
Yeah.
And both of them, for some reason, I don't know. And I always think about that movie. I have it on Blu-ray now. I haven't really watched it in a while, but like that's one of those movies. If I ever did like have a kid one day, I'd probably
Definitely.
I haven't watched
sit
it.
down
You know
with
what I
that
mean?
one. Yeah.
It takes you through. It gets really emotional.
Yes,
it's
definitely.
depressing, and then it leaves you on a high note. You know what I mean? The effects in that movie, like the makeup, are freaking
amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
I remember being scared the first time of that wolf.
The wolf was amazing.
Yeah, that wolf actually had me like shook. Like if I look in the shadows when I was a kid and saw anything glistening, that's what I thought was in that corner.
That was so well done.
Yeah.
The big rock guy.
Yep. Oh yeah.
It was so well done. And you actually thought he was like a giant.
Yeah. Yep. You guys have really delved into that one.
Well, my number 3 pick, I don't know if you guys are going to agree or not. If not, I have a backup. My number 3 pick is Mortal Kombat. Because it's another video game movie, but I like cheesy movies. That's like my guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat, I feel like, is the best video game movie. Or if you can argue Scott Pilgrim, maybe.
Not Street Fighter.
Was it a
Street Fighter is good, but
that
it's
was
not fantasy.
that's like cheesy of them all was that Street Fighter movie.
But I just because Mortal Kombat's a movie, I don't know why, but I could put it on and always watch it from start to finish. I don't know why. It's just one of those movies. It's like guilty
It's
pleasure.
like me watching The Rock.
Yeah,
I could always watch that.
I'm sure everyone has like a bad movie they can always watch over and
yeah.
over again.
I remember that.
Plenty of those.
She broke his shades. I watched that on Blu-ray, like a bad cut, and I remember I had the tape, took it to my family's house, and me and my cousins sit around watching it, and it cut off towards the end, and they're like, "Well." They got mad at me. I was like, well, it was a bootleg. What did you expect? Like, it's like someone actually sit there with the camera.
one of those.
Yeah.
Rough. Anyway.
My backup pick was going to be Final Fantasy Advent Children, but I wasn't sure if that was sci-fi or fantasy.
That's definitely. I would say
Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Final Fantasy. That's where kind of the series got a little more.
Surprised you chose that, not Spirits Within.
Yeah, no, I didn't enjoy Spirits Within.
No?
Let's move on to number 2.
Okay, I guess number 2, my pick would be, well, these are last two I'm going to be picking are just a heads up, both going to be animated. So for number 2 would be Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. No Studio Ghibli.
No, I've never seen it.
Oh man, if Dan is listening to this, he would definitely agree.
What year did that come out?
I believe this was 82, 83. It was an early 80s Studio Ghibli movie.
Yeah.
It does have some sci-fi because there's airships in it, but it's mostly there's not a lot of like traditional science fiction. It's a very fantasy movie, but it's more about a girl fulfilling a prophecy. By basically saving this village from these basically bugs that were going to destroy the valley that her family and her people were from, and she does this by sacrificing herself at the end in order to do so, and thus fulfilling that prophecy that she sees in the beginning of the movie. But as far as an anime movie, if you've never seen it, the Blu-ray's out. It's really cheap, $15. Just watch it. It's one of my second favorite animated fantasy movies ever made because it has a message too. It's a very environmental message to it too, and the action's amazing. They had some of the later, well, now you would think of them as old, but at the time some of the early Japanese animators that worked on this movie would end up doing other movies like Akira and Ghost in the Shell, and they got their start from doing a couple animated scenes in Nausicaa.
The best time period of anime.
It was pretty much the best time. Everything's hand drawn. And you just go. I just went to watch it as part of Ghibli Fest last year, and the movie in the theaters still holds up a lot better than almost any other animated movie, especially as far as storytelling, and having a very powerful message. And it's also kind of violent too. People get killed. There's tanks, people get shot and stabbed. It's not a kid-friendly movie per se, but it's I would say as far as the messaging and all that goes, it certainly is.
Surprised I've never seen this movie.
Yeah, Studio Ghibli makes a lot of fantasy.
Well, they make a
movies.
lot of fantasies, but a lot of the early stuff is kind of where, if you watch a lot of their Ghibli stuff now, it's more geared towards, because of shifting demographics and more
Right.
like kid,
Mhm.
more child, like
Yeah.
you know, movies meant for kids. But back in the day, in the '80s, like they did some really, really amazing movies. In fact, well, I'll mention it in my next pick,
Right.
but they did a lot of things that would be picked up in video games and stuff like that.
My pick, it's fantasy in my opinion.
Yeah.
But there's very little magic in it. Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
I just remember watching that, not knowing that it was He-Man until like I saw Skeletor in it, and then had to go back and like, wait, okay, Man of Arms. Yep, they named him because they called him his real name, Prince Adam. And and I grown at that age, I didn't know that he was He-Man. He wasn't Prince Adam to me. I never really put that together. But
were you a He-Man fan back in the day?
yeah, I loved the villains more than I liked He-Man.
Yeah, right. Like the toys more than anything.
That was pretty much what got me into it. Was like, because you saw guys who like, because Ninja Turtles, you had typical henchmen, but outside of their villains, of course. But for me, He-Man, Masters of the Universe also was like, for me, it was like, wait, he's Dolph Lundgren is like playing a hero now. There was that. There was the seeing Skeletor and the dwarf guy and that keyboard thing. I wanted that thing. I was like, I don't know what the key to the universe, whatever it was. Definitely.
Yeah.
The concept that this was a world, they're having a war, in the middle of it, that was another big thing for me. And then you just like, nope, we won't kill you, just send you to another planet, that type of thing. The full scale invasion that happened, like towards the end, and also I forget what other movie he was in, but he was like a principal in something else.
Yeah,
But the cop,
Back to the Future.
right? He was it was
Principal from Back to the Future.
right. Seeing him also, because I didn't see this when it first came out, because it was pretty much at that age, around that time, I was in Trinidad, so it would have been out in the States before it came out. Same thing with He-Man. He-Man was probably like off TV for probably like 2 years before we got to see it in Trinidad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then it was syndicated, but it was still like not when it was like on. Same thing. That's how I actually caught up on a lot of anime and a lot of cartoons. Like up here it was like, oh yeah, that was like 10 years ago. I was like, well, I just watched it, so it's new to me.
Yeah.
It's big to me. Definitely, Masters of the Universe is
So
up there.
what came first, the cartoon, the toys, or the movie? I'm
I
not
think it was
sure.
the cartoon.
Yeah.
The cartoon itself. That's
Cartoon.
what it was.
And the toys came out right around that time too.
Yeah,
right?
they were cranking
Kinda
those
hand
out.
in hand.
Yeah.
I was a big fan back in the day. He-Man, Master of the Universe.
Yeah.
I had almost all the toys.
Yeah.
I had the sword.
Bear's escaping.
What's wrong, Dad? Dad, you saved the castle!
That was
Castle Grayskull.
Yep. The
Huge
thing that let me down, I wanted to see Battle Cat. Like I
Yeah,
wanted
right.
to see this big
And that-
green tiger running around.
I wanted to see Oro.
Yeah.
What the hell his name is? They didn't do him.
They
They,
didn't
did
do
like
him.
another kind
There
of
was
like
the little dwarf guy. I
Yeah.
can't remember his name.
Yeah, I forget his name. I guess that was the Oro.
Yeah, that was. I think that's what it was. But definitely, they could have just threw a hat on him just to make it.
I remember that movie. I loved that movie
Yeah.
too. It was very epic too.
Yeah,
Right.
it felt like it for me. The whole thing where it like felt like okay, it was kind of like in that situation of they're in a helpless situation here when Skeletor finally shows up with his army, and then you got to see him go to this gold mode where he was like
Yeah.
the ultimate power. He's
Right.
whipping them with
That's
the
cool.
Yeah, like for
Yeah.
me that was like big. I was like, oh my god, like
Yeah.
he doesn't get this far in the cartoon, like
Yeah.
like.
Very
All right.
nice.
So what? Number 2.
Yep.
My number 2 is Labyrinth.
Mm.
David Bowie. Watched that movie a million times
Yep.
growing up. Loved everything about it. Loved the Muppets, the Jim Henson.
Yeah.
I wish Jim Henson lived longer.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I wanted to see what he could do.
Mhm.
Even though the Jim Henson studio did make more movies,
Yeah.
I think it was Jim Henson that really
Yeah.
was the visionary, of that group.
Definitely. They
Was
still
that
do the
the-
Muppets, I think.
Yeah, they do, but it's not. It's
Right.
hasn't been as good. Like another movie that's an honorable mention, Dark Crystal. Like,
Yeah.
that was
Mm.
so different.
Mm-hmm.
And that was total Jim Henson, So I wish you got to see more of his stuff, but Labyrinth, the music I loved. I love
Yeah.
the Muppets,
David
loved
Bowie.
The
the
costumes,
David
the,
Bowie, the
the
tights,
characters. Yeah.
the hair.
The tights, yeah.
No, everything about that movie.
Yeah. There's nothing really negative you could say about it, I think.
I always
No.
wanted to do the crystal thing on his hand as a
Yeah.
kid. Like I was like,
Yeah.
I need to find one. I was like, I don't know how
That's
he's
cool.
doing it. The scene where they're trying to take her head.
I like that scene.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that scene.
What are the fire?
Fire game,
Fire
yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, love
That-
that scene. Love that song. Actually,
Mhm.
Yeah.
still listen to that song.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Just everything. That movie is just great.
Overall,
The,
good
the,
movie.
the stink swamp.
Yeah,
Everything about that movie.
Yeah.
Bob
And every
with
time I
Eternal
see a
Stench, yeah.
trash heap, I think about that old lady at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Right.
the masquerade ball scene's cool. I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of good scenes in that movie.
Definitely.
Good
And then-
soundtrack.
Me seeing also the sequence where she's going up the stairs, the staircases all over the
Yeah.
room.
Mhm.
That
I
painting,
remember
yeah.
I remember seeing that in a picture somewhere, like as a remembering. And then when I saw the movie, I was like, they took that out of my brain because I always thought if I did that,
Right.
like putting myself in that situation. But definitely watching that when she's chasing her son, her little brother around.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that movie when you were young?
Yeah, definitely.
How about you, Henry? You remember that movie?
Labyrinth.
Yeah.
I just watched it the other day. So.
Yeah.
Although I watched it later
Mhm.
than probably a lot of people, so it's not on my top list.
Mhm.
But I mean, for just watching it, I mean, it's very unique, and especially with the way the puppetry is done, it's really
Right.
cool.
Yeah. It's cool. The puppetry.
Because oddly enough, I watched that movie. I think the same time I remember watching Farscape. And I was like, wait a minute, it's like these puppets look kind of similar, and then
Yeah.
go online, it's like it's from the same company.
Yeah.
So
Cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All right. So that's my number 2.
My number 2, I guess you can argue it's a horror movie, but I think the fantasy elements overweigh it. Army of Darkness. It's my
Yeah.
number 2.
that was my honorable mention.
Mhm.
I didn't put it up as a.
I would definitely say that the first 2 Evil Dead movies are definitely horror,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but Army of Darkness kind of changes it to more fantasy based, I would say. It
Yeah.
has horror elements, but I think
Yeah.
overall,
Yeah. It was
I
like
saw
an
that one
adventure.
first.
Fantasy.
Yeah,
Oh, you
fantasy.
saw that one first.
I saw that one first in the
I think
movie,
I did
and then
too.
went back to
Yeah.
go see
I saw the
Evil
second
Dead.
one first, I think.
The
And
second
then,
one's
and then
like
I
a
watched the
comedy.
first one, then I
Yeah.
watched the third one.
First
Yeah, it
one's
was
like a
weird
horror.
going from the second movie and then watching the first one. It's like, why is this?
Yeah, how did they?
Like, you're just watching. It's like this is a gore fest. Like holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
And then going straight to 3 is like, this is a comedy.
Yeah, it's like an adventure comedy.
Yeah.
fantasy.
yeah, it's a good series, but I think Army of Darkness is my favorite
Really?
because it really shaped Ash to be
Mm.
like Ash,
Oh, yeah,
how you
yeah.
know him now.
Yeah.
Kind of like a comedy guy.
Yeah.
Like
one
badass.
line.
He's been
Yeah.
through enough that he's like, he can't take anything serious now. It's like,
Definitely one of the most influential characters, I think, in movies.
Yeah. Hail to the King.
Right. Duke Nukem, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Duke Nukem.
Berserk, I think.
Mhm.
Guts. But yeah, good like medieval type movie.
Mm.
Skeletons, which I think they probably got the idea from Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah,
I'd say.
probably.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Was that stop motion animation?
I think
I think
it was,
so.
Yeah.
There's a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what
same.
a lot of perspective tricks they did in that movie. were
Right, with the
pretty nice.
little,
The little-
ashes, yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you Sam Raimi was a big Ray Harryhausen fan.
I think so, yeah.
You know, thing. Yeah.
But the Sam Raimi, he has this I don't know who does the makeup effects,
Mhm.
but like when they're in the well and Ash
Mhm.
is finding that monster,
Yeah.
that makeup is like the same they would use in Evil Dead,
Mm.
Drag Me to Hell. It's very, I don't know
Yeah.
who
It's
does
his
the
style.
makeup for
I don't
it,
think
but-
he does the makeup. But
Yeah. It's
He probably-
his, you see those
probably got a
characters and you
team,
know
yeah.
it's a Sam Raimi movie. for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, you want to do honorable mentions real quick?
Yeah, and before that, we could talk about what makes a movie a fantasy. We were discussing if Star Wars as a fantasy, but I feel like if there's another element that powers over it, like sci-fi, I would categorize it as sci-fi, not fantasy.
Right.
Right.
And like when you think of a movie, what's the first thing you think? You think it's a fantasy movie?
Right.
You think it's a sci-fi
Like
movie?
you could argue movies like Dracula is a fantasy, but it's more horror. I would say.
Yeah. It's definitely more of a horror. Like Star Wars, for me, it's more of a sci-fi.
Yeah.
But for some people, like
For me, I would definitely I would say sci-fi fantasy only because I feel like you're throwing lightning bolts. You're stopping stuff in the air. To me, the Force is magic, and
you're moving rocks with your mind.
you know, to me that is magic. To me, I
anything
understand.
like futuristic or post-apocalyptic, I think is more sci-fi.
Like Road Warrior.
And like Blade Runner, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely more sci-fi, even though they have fantasy elements.
Yeah.
Well, one of my honorable mentions, I wasn't sure, because when I think of this movie, I don't think of it as a fantasy. I think of it as a children's movie, Willy Wonka,
Mm-hmm.
Chocolate Factory, the original one. That's why it's not higher on my list, because I love that movie. That movie probably would have been like number one if I considered it a fantasy. But I don't, so that's why it's lower on my list.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still like you could put it in the fantasy category, right?
Oompa Loompas,
But I think of it more when I think of it as a children's movie. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Musical, children's
Musical comedy almost, you know.
Definitely more children's, I think.
So
do you have any other honorable mentions you like to?
I do. All right, so
others?
Willy Wonka was one of them. Wizard of Oz, the original one.
Right, exactly.
Okay, that's
a movie I've seen a billion times probably throughout my life.
Yeah.
Of course. But that's another one that I don't think it's a I don't think of it as a fantasy.
I would definitely throw it in there.
Wizard of Oz? No, I'd say it's a fantasy.
I mean, yeah, it has a wizard in the title.
Right.
It should be fantasy, but
I mean,
for some reason I just don't picture
flying
it.
monkeys.
Yeah.
To me that
every aspect of it.
Yeah.
Return to Oz was my number
Fantasy,
5.
Yeah.
But I just think of it more of like family movie,
I think
musical.
Back then, the idea of that wasn't really like
Yeah,
fantasy, right?
it wasn't like the same as we would think.
It was
of
more
fantasy.
cartoonish, I would say.
Yeah. Let's see, another honorable mention I have. I talked about the Dark Crystal a little bit, and Kroll. I don't know if you guys know Kroll.
Wow. That's what, I remember Kroll.
I remember the weapon. Those
hitting
things.
in my head.
The weapon, it's like almost like a ninja star. It has like
blades.
Blades at the end of it, and the guy would throw it and it would come back to him.
Mm-hmm.
The coolest, probably one of the coolest weapons.
In my head, ringing bells.
Liam Neeson's in it, right?
Liam Neeson, yeah.
Right.
I guess it was an English movie.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a weird movie, not really well
with the spider.
edited.
Right.
In the room, is that? No, that's Conan.
I think the spider's in it.
No, I was thinking about the room with the mirrors, but that's Conan. That's one of the Conan movies. Yeah.
Conan should also be an honorable mention.
That's my last honorable mention. Yeah, was Conan the
original one.
Yeah, the original.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's my honorable mention.
Did anyone mention Legend?
No.
No, I was going to say something about it, but I didn't think it kind of wouldn't be top my top like 20.
Yeah, it's in my honorable mention. Legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry.
Yeah.
It's like basically Legend of Zelda, I would say, in movie form.
Almost right. Yeah. When you think about it, Ganon is.
But a lot of the other ones were mentioned already. Willow, Return to Oz, Lord of the Rings. I put Fellowship of the Rings as my top Lord of the Rings pick. Yeah. Just because I like the first one the most. Henny, what are some of your honorable mentions?
I don't know if this one actually counts because I don't really see it. I'm just gonna say Jumanji.
Yeah,
I kind of thought because it's weird as it's not really a fantasy because it does have magical elements in it, but then again it's modern times.
Right.
Only magical about it is that things happen on the board game that causes it, things to come out. So I mean,
it's close.
It's close.
Yeah.
I don't really count it. I put it as an honorable mention just because it's one of my childhood movies as I watched.
Yeah.
Another movie we already mentioned it, Time Bandits. It's because it's Monty Python crew. I mean, it's one of the few other movies I saw besides the Holy Grail that I enjoyed quite a bit. And the last few are unfortunately since I didn't grow up watching a lot of live action stuff. A lot of it are either foreign movies or cartoons. So I have a Chinese ghost story, which is, unless you know what I'm talking
I
about,
know
you would
what
have
you're
no
talking
idea.
No.
Yeah.
But it's basically like a Chinese folklore about
Vampires.
a guy, not really about, well, yeah, about vampires, but mostly about, it's a love story about, you know, the spirit and this guy who's basically a debt collector. But it's a really unique, you know, if you talk to anyone that's from Hong Kong, they ask if they ever seen it, they probably have, because it's extremely popular, especially since it's more of a love story than anything.
It's called a Chinese ghost story.
Chinese ghost story, yeah.
I've never
It's pretty
seen
good.
that
It's
one.
I think what 88,
I like
87. It's
those types of movies.
yeah,
so I probably like them.
it's probably one of my, because of the age I watched it. It was one of the better movies I just remember watching with fantasy
I
elements.
think honorable mentions.
My honorable mention is it's a Keanu Reeves movie.
The other one.
Bill and Ted. And like I said, I don't know. That's why I say, like, for me, it does
Yeah,
it.
that's
It's
more.
Is that
sci-fi,
sci-fi? Is that
Yeah.
like fantasy? Because I mean, to me, it's more the second one hits more fantasy for me, just because
Yeah,
you got
definitely.
the death involved in it and that type of elements to it.
Yeah.
You get when they go to heaven and all that stuff. Like, to me, that's fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah, the first one could be like more sci-fi because time
Yeah.
travel
Yeah.
is a sci-fi theme.
But like I said, the second one to me, it was like, okay, they're definitely blurring lines here.
Yeah.
But I think, and that was it. Those are pretty much most of my honorable mentions. Anything else would be.
You mentioned yours.
I had one more.
Mm-hmm.
A Highlander. I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. Definitely.
That was a
thing-
cool movie.
It wasn't on my list because I like the past story more than the modern
Yeah.
story. I felt it was a lot stronger than when they were in the modern times.
Yeah.
Right.
I liked seeing the different past eras.
Yeah, that was weird. Like, I think the editing was a little off in that movie,
Yeah.
but I thought it was still a cool movie for its time.
I
I
love
used to
that
remember
whole
watching
lore.
that back in.
That's
the day.
like one. That's probably one of my top, almost, I guess, franchises in my head of like a world that doesn't really encompass too much else.
Mhm.
The Highlander story to me is definitely like top. That's definitely in my top 10 as far as
Yeah.
like
Cool concept.
lore. Yeah, concept and story.
Immortals.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that because no one mentioned it. And I felt like
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely you gotta talk about that.
Right.
What?
Yeah. So let's move on to number one pick.
Number ones.
Henry, you want to go?
Um,
Or I'll go first then, because it was already mentioned, so I don't have to say much. My number one pick was Labyrinth.
That was
Yeah.
once again, that was mine
Yeah,
too.
so
So
We were, both of you guys.
yeah,
So
that
Labyrinth's
was
high
that
up
was
on.
up on my list.
Every-
It was number 2 on my list. So
Everything that was already said, can't say much more. Just
Right.
one of my favorite soundtracks in the movie for sure.
Yeah.
I still
Yeah, it's
listen to it.
magic.
Yeah,
I think if you do an average of all the movies we picked, Labyrinth would
probably
be
the highest.
the
Yeah,
Gamer Dojo's number 1 movie.
I'd say. We'd have to pull the others that are missing, but but yeah, good pick.
It's alright. My number 1 fantasy movie was actually The Lord of the Rings: Fellowship of the Rings.
The first one.
Yeah, the very first one. That got me into The Lord of the Rings because at the time I worked at the movie theaters when that came out, right? And I didn't know Lord of the Rings. I didn't really care.
Yeah.
But at the end of the movies, like you would sometimes, like if you worked there, you would clean up, you know, after the movie's over. So sometimes you have to wait until the movie's over. And I remember being there at the end of the movie and just kind of like watching and just being blown away by that movie. Like,
Yeah.
it just sucked me in.
Yeah.
Like,
I could see that.
yeah.
Definitely.
See it on that big screen,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm totally like surprised in how cool it was and how well
Yeah.
it's done. Maybe I went out, I got all the books, read all the books,
Wow. Yeah.
and
That's big. If a movie makes you
Yeah.
want to go read
Yeah.
the book, then that's
like after I saw the end, I
Yeah.
went, all right, I got to see this movie. So like my day off, I went in, I watched the movie. Then I got all the books, read all the books. I even read The Hobbit,
Yeah.
which I loved. Actually, out of all the books, The Hobbit was my favorite out of all those books. And out of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the first book was also my favorite
Was
book.
your favorite?
Yeah, but that movie, there's something special about it. I loved all three of those movies, but that movie for me was my favorite, and that's what got me into the fantasy genre more. So that had to be number one on my list.
Yeah.
The final battle, I think, is awesome with the orcs.
That's what I saw,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my god, this is so cool."
Yeah, I like that.
At the time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't actually watched that movie in a while, but yeah.
It's time. It's the time consuming a little bit now, but it's definitely.
Being on a big screen, seeing that was awesome.
I think that's what kind of pulled me out of the third one because I didn't watch that on the big screen. I watched Two Towers.
But yeah, I think out of all those, I saw the third one and the second one in theaters. But the third one, like by the time it was over, I was like, I'm glad it was over. It dragged on way too much.
Like
I think the first one was perfect.
It's kind of like AI, where you thought it was gonna end and it kept going.
Yeah. I wonder if that's on anyone's sci-fi list.
Yeah.
Probably not. So you could pick.
Yeah.
I'd have to say the first movie did have that amazing scene at the end where he's telling him I would have followed you. Is it my brother? My lord, my king? That phrase?
Yeah. Boromir.
Yeah.
I always feel bad about
Right.
how he ended up
Right.
in that movie.
And I remember,
And just them disappearing into the woods too at the very end of that movie.
Yeah.
Seeing that, just something about that was like almost magical.
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
the scene with Sam and Frodo at the end.
I
Making,
got tired of those two. I
made
really
one of
got
the
tired
other
of those two.
or Gamer Dojo members cry. Sitting over there in the
They made one of the Gamer Dojo members cry.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
When Sam was going in the water. Yeah.
Does it still get you too? Mr.
Frodo, no.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
Oh yeah,
Cool.
it was great.
There you go.
Alright, so that's my number one.
That one's, Henry, what's your number one?
Okay, my number one movie would be Castle in the Sky.
Okay.
Another animated movie, as I said. A lot of animated movies growing up for me.
Yeah.
But when you talk about traditional like fantasy, especially what you would think of from like Final Fantasy games that we played, you know, with airships and sky pirates and stuff like that, Castle in the Sky had that, you know, to almost to a T, you know, to the fact that you have a princess who, like a long lost princess who gets kidnapped, you know, by this greedy kind of like a military person, and then you have another kid who's like a more like a young spunky kid who basically saves her and you know, joins the Sky Pirates to find this lost civilization, this, you know, castle, you know, that's floating up in the sky that has magical weapons and powers and stuff like that. And then talk about crystals. There are a ton of crystals all over the place, from the girl's necklace to the big crystal that's keeping the city afloat in the sky. But you know, I remember watching this movie as a kid and just amazed that, you know, and it has probably one of my best favorite endings, because it doesn't end off in like, oh, it just feels like it's, you know, with the way they fly off. I mean, it's not really a spoiler. You kind of know what happens. You know, everything gets resolved, and you know, these two kids who you start the movie with, and they say their goodbyes to the pirates, and they fly off, and it's just the movie ends. It ends extremely perfectly, as it's, you know, like there's an end, there's a beginning, and then there's an end. They're like, they don't need a sequel or anything. The movie just ends. You know that it's happily ever after.
That's cool.
You know, you talk about, you know, fantasy movies. That's kind of what I would depict or think of when I think of fantasy movies. You know, but watch it in the theaters if you can. Watch it on Blu-ray. I know Disney doesn't put this up on any of their streaming services, but I watch this movie almost once every year.
So
Yeah, that Disney.
No,
get
more,
together.
probably more than that sometimes, because I'll put it on the background. Because
Disney owns that studio now?
No, but their distribution is done by Disney. Now it's with Shout Factory. They have their own brand.
Well, thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Join us
Leave a
next
comment,
time.
I guess.
We're gonna try to
You
do
know.
this every month. Yeah, and
Yeah.
let us know what your favorite fantasy movies are.
Stay tuned. We'll do our
Anything.
top 5. What do you want to do next for me? Top 5.
I think we're gonna let Jimbo fight.
Alright, that's fine. Sure.
Yeah.
Since he was saying.
But the countdown will happen again.
Once a month, we'll try to do it.
Yeah.
We'll do one of these and then a normal here and now podcast. Once a
Yeah.
month.
You know,
So,
stay tuned.
Let us know, guys.